See, I win. There you go. Okay.
We'll tell Jeff.
So the advertised topic, which we will still cover, is expensive weddings. The second topic, because it's actually a relatively short tshuva, is right, who gets to make shul decisions? Is it the board or the majority of the membership? Right? Will decision-making
Who
go?
was that who laughed?
What?
Somebody laughed at that remark.
Was that Judy? Was that you laughing?
Yes.
Okay, so it's an interesting question. It's actually a question that probably has come up in a lot of shuls over the years. I mentioned to Eve and Steve who are here, I didn't want to put that out as a topic so nobody should like start wondering what issue we're fighting about. Tuna fish. That's an old issue. I do remember a board meeting where we voted for $500,000 to do the roof in about 30 seconds, and then we fought about tuna fish for an hour. That, 17 years ago, until I lose my mind, I'll never actually. It was like, let's redo the roof, $500,000, hands up. Oh, the hands are up. And tuna fish. What do we? I don't know. It has too much mayonnaise. It's got too much celery. Decisions. I don't know. Okay, but let's go to
no, the volume was up.
Expensive weddings. Okay, the question that he has asked, and again, I'll preface this by saying this is a dated tshuva. I'm not sure he could imagine an expensive wedding like we could imagine an expensive wedding. Right? If we're talking 40 years ago in Israel, I don't know what an expensive wedding was, but it's probably not like some of the insanity that we have seen with our own eyes. We won't name names, but there are crazy weddings, right? That's for sure. And nevertheless, the question is asked, right? So there was apparently a radio show where it was discussed, and somebody asked the question. Didn't get back to him right away. Well, that's the last one. And the question was as follows, right? You have large, expensive weddings, and there were two primary objections to having such a wedding. Number one is a lack of tznius. Right? It's immodest to, right? We'll try and flesh that out in a moment. The second was there is generally a tough economy in Israel. This is before the high-tech boom, right? And how, is it really nice for you to make an expensive wedding when the country's struggling? Let's flesh out the first one, though, which is interesting. Right? What does it mean it's a lack of tznius?
You're showing off that you have all this money.
Right. Meaning tznius, as we understand it, right, is mostly about shoulders, knees, and toes. Not so much, but in some communities, maybe toes, right? Head, shoulders, knees, and toes. That's right. It used to be a song, but now it's tznius, right? But that's a component of tznius. Right, but here is the other definition. Tznius means modesty. It means not showing off, not flaunting. Right, you can flaunt your body as much as you can flaunt your wealth, and therefore, is it a lack of tznius to say, I'm going to Italy and I'm taking 200 of my closest, dearest friends, and I'm going to do it on. I don't even know it's in Italy, but okay, whatever it might be. That's the end of my Italy story because I've yet to be at a wedding in Italy, but right, and everyone said, "Oh, did you hear they went to this wedding and it was unbelievable and it was crazy?" Right? Maybe that's a lack of tznius, right? I always do laugh, and then we'll get to the tshuva. Right? When I see people wearing $50,000 watches and a red bendel, which one cancels the other out? Right? If the red bendel is to avoid ayin hara, $1,000 watch. That might just be, and again, I know you want to wear a watch, knock yourself out. The watch that I'm wearing right now also started with a 5, but it was 50.
It still works.
It was 2 digits. It's a 2-digit buy. It was not a one. It's not a one. It wasn't $5. It was $50 or something, right? But okay. So he takes the reason we have a second. Again, right? I find an interesting tshuva. I put the topic out, then I have to go ahead and do it and learn it. He introduces a concept called shoshvinin, which is an old concept, right? So if you look at the source sheet, we'll jump right into again, the source sheet is in your text box, or text, whatever we call it. He has a fascinating theory on how these weddings work. Clearly not applicable to, I don't think, to American weddings, but I'll give you his theory, some of his side points. We can talk about it, and then we'll go on to the second tshuva. So the Rambam writes as follows. Again, it's the first source on the sheet. It's in law. Interestingly, it's in the laws of zechia and matana, of acquiring and gifting, as opposed to the laws of nashim, weddings, whatever it might be, right? But he writes, minag pasha b'rov hamedinos. It is the clearest custom in most of the countries. Shibisman siyisa adam isha, when a guy gets married to a woman, mishalchen lo rein miyodav maos, right? His friends, the people that know him, send him money. Kadeshi is chazek behen ala hotza shemotzi beishto, right? That the money's got to spend on the wedding, maybe the wedding dress, right? So people send money to help with the wedding. Right, that was the old custom, right?
To
But
help with the wedding, not to help set up a household.
yeah, that's what
That's, okay, so that's
that was the
little
custom,
distinction.
100%, right? That's the custom, right? But Oakland is Shosnim, Achasim B'Shivas Yemei HaMishta, right? And they come for Sheva Brach, they eat, they drink, and for some of them, Hakol Kaminag HaMedina, right? Everything according to the custom. The Elu HaMa'os Shemishalchen Nikran Shosh Binos. Right, that's the concept of a shoshvin. Today they call shoshvin groomsmen, but that's really a terrible translation. They're not groomsmen. Groomsmen certainly don't serve that function. Just make sure. Give me 1 second. Make sure it's not. Sorry, give me one. Okay. Right, the osan sheshalchan amos. Right, those are the people who are called shoshvinos. Now, what's fascinating is the next halacha beis. Hashoshvinos eno matana gemura. It's not a complete gift.
Yes, it is.
Right, it's not a complete gift. Hadvarim yedun shelo shalach zeh asara dinarim b'shul shiyochal v'yishta b'zeh.
2.
Let's just okay. Right, he's not giving it so that you should be able to eat. Right, Ela mipnei, the second line, Shibedaito hayashim yisahu isha, yachzor v'yishlach lo, kemoshe shalach lo. It's a gift that's going to come back to you, because if I am your shoshvin and I give you money when you get married, guess what happens when I get married? You're going to give me the money back. And right, and therefore he says, and this is actually the most astounding line, Lefichach im nasa ze isha v'lo hichzer lo ashoshvinus. What if I'm the Grinch? So Steve got married, right? Well, I got married first, and Steve gave me money, and then Steve got married, and I'm a stingy guy. So I decide I'm going to go to Steve's wedding. I'm not going to give him any money. Says the Rambam, Hareza tovo b'din umotzi mimeno. Steve could take me to Beis Din and take the money from me, because that's the expectation, right? The expectation is we have now our youngest sheer listener ever, Karen. That's fabulous. We have our youngest sheer member. No, keep it on. Don't. Right, look at that. Hold on 1 second. Everyone has to see the beautiful baby. Oh, see, you got the from everybody here.
Sorry, I'm babysitting, but I wanted to hear.
That's okay. We
The baby can learn
she
too.
is that's our youngest participant, so I'm thrilled. That's the concept of shoshvinin. Now he believes, and at some level maybe it's true, that the modern concept of shoshvinos is the wedding gift, and he thinks that and maybe it's true. That you guys out there can tell me more than I would know. That you give what the wedding costs. I mean, you essentially give what, like, your cost of the wedding as a wedding gift. I don't know if people think about it that way.
No, because I think of some weddings.
I have heard
What?
of it.
There's some weddings where you just can't.
Well, I know, I've
Well,
been to a lot of
this is
them.
why we're going to talk about
Right.
expensive weddings. There's somewhere you
Right, so,
can afford it.
I
so here-
think
Yes, Judy.
that people do tend to look at a more extravagant wedding and give a bigger gift than, I don't want to use the word cheaper, but less extravagant. rightly
Okay.
or wrongly, I think people
Why,
do
why do you
tend
think that
to,
is? Do you have a theory as to why that is?
I guess they figure they spent more money on you. I don't know.
So
Right,
that's
so
the-
I actually, you're probably right. I would imagine that you're right. Right, part of it might be that you want to seem, I don't know if this is true either, but maybe people want to feel like if the host spend that much money and they're wealthy, that you should give a wealthy person gifts so that you can show them that you're wealthy too. That might be a part of it. I don't know. But
It also
his,
depends on whether your kids held on to their list of who gave them what, because very often you try to match that. But if they
yes, that is
deleted it,
true.
then
In the Excel spreadsheet age, it's much simpler, right? But back in the day, it was a piece of paper. It was a piece of paper. So that's all true. His assumption is, yes.
I'm just curious, if someone moves into a community and is already married, gets invited to a wedding, gives the present, he's not expecting one back though.
So that is a very good question. I think if you're, so I'll tell you, I don't know the real answer to that question because no, we don't learn the halachas of shoshvinos because we don't really practice it today. So I couldn't give you a halacha l'maisa answer, but it might be that it only applies to single people. But I'm not sure. That again is a very good question, but that's not in the practical halacha section of why you smicha, or probably any smicha that we know of. Although it could well be that in some Hasidic circles that they have stricter rules on things. They might well. Again, it's not my world, obviously, but it's not implausible that in such a world, some of these customs still actually are in place. So that might be. So his theory is that there's no problem with an expensive wedding because you're essentially helping them, covering your cost at the wedding. At the end of the tshuva, he actually says if you're not going to do that, you shouldn't go to the wedding, which is fascinating.
So if I know my wedding's gonna be more modest than yours, you're saying I shouldn't come?
No, you just have to give the money.
I have to give them all the money that they are spending, but then when they come to my wedding, it's not gonna be so expensive.
Right. And maybe that doesn't have to be the same amount of money. Again, it's an interesting theory. So that's the bulk of his tshuva, which is why we have a second tshuva. But at the end, he throws in a couple of points. He does not, however, he doesn't address the tznius issue. He addresses the other issues. I'll address the tznius issue, and then I'm happy to take questions, and then we'll quickly do the second tshuva. He said, number one, right? Many people make their parnasa from these weddings. So the larger the wedding, the more people are getting parnasa, and that's not something that you should easily disband. Fair point. Number three, he says, right? It increases the joy. And he said, especially during tough times, right? People should come and be happy and joyous. And with that, he says, as long as you're going to contribute commensurate to your cost, he doesn't see an issue with it. And he does not address the tznius issue. He seems to bypass it, which again leads me back to my first point, which is he probably didn't really experience over-the-top insane weddings.
Well, it's not a question of tznius, but more of a not embarrassing other people, right? If you are richer, then it's not only a question of tznius. If you are richer than other people, should you say, I'm not going to invite you because I know you can't pay?
So even
or-
you're hung up on the equivalence. Let's forget the equivalence for a
Right.
moment.
Just making people feel bad. That they can't hold themselves
So
up to
so
the
that is a
standard.
fact, right? So Eve raises a fascinating issue, which in the world of death we actually seem to have gotten, but not in the world of simcha, right? Maybe we should all have the same wedding so as not to embarrass those who don't have. It's a fair thought. It clearly has not taken hold.
Hey, Rabbi,
Yes.
in Panama, I don't know if they still do it, but in Panama, they do have a rule about where the weddings can be, how much money you can spend across the board. So somebody there took this very seriously.
Good. And listen, and there might be, again, there might be Hasidic communities that can
Mhm.
pull this off, although I doubt it, because there's some very wealthy Hasidim, and even the Rebbe needs money.
Is,
Yeah.
is it expensive or outlandish? Because expensive could be I'm inviting 700 people because I want the entire community there, as opposed to an over-the-top type of wedding where it's 200 people, but I've had the entertainers come in and flowing in from Washington, from Florida and wherever.
That's an interesting point. I see that we could make such a distinction.
I'm trying to focus in on your
Right.
word of expensive I mean, I don't know how the,
So it's interesting. I don't know, right? We do it, right? We actually all have the same at 120. We will all be buried in a pine box, or if you're in Eretz Yisrael, you just be in a shroud and put in the ground. All right, that is not because there is any kind of mystical meaning to the pine box. It is because the pine box is cheap. And we don't want to embarrass people as they leave this world, right? For all of the nice vorts about you don't take your money with you, it's true, it's a nice vort. It is not why we get buried in a pine box. The Gemara tells us we are buried in a pine box, or we're buried in the same clothing to not embarrass those who don't have. That has not taken over in the world of weddings. And the truth is, just to push back on expensive weddings for a moment, in support of, let's say, there's no such halacha that says we all have to live in the same house. And I don't know that that's an expectation, right? The reality of the world is some people have more money and some people have less money. That's just the reality of this world. And I think somebody who works hard and is successful, I don't know that across the board we should say to them, you don't get to enjoy what you have. Now, if you give no tzedakah and you go, then you have a problem, right? Everything's a question of balance and priorities. But if you're a big baal tzedakah and you give a lot of money, and you're good people, I'm not sure that it's necessarily a Jewish idea to say everything has to be the same. Again, we do it in the world of funerals. So on that, again, right? We can drive different cars. Yeah, you know what we should start doing, by the way? We should sell red bundles that are big enough for cars. That's an idea. That's I got a business plan. I like that. Okay, right. But for me, the line is, and I've had people tell me this is wrong also, that they don't agree. I think there's a difference between that was a nice, beautiful wedding, and as opposed to walking out when every person walks out and says, God, how much money did they spend on that wedding? Right? I mean, to me, in my head, although I will admit that's in my head, to me, that's a line, right? Meaning, I was at a wedding 2 years ago where the flowers were in ice. They were in ice vases, and they had to have drip trays, and it was like you walked out saying, like, what are they doing? Like, you literally watch their money drip away. So in my head, that's kind of where I would draw the line. I will admit that I'm not in either category, so maybe I'm wrong, right? I mean, meaning, so that, to me, that does make sense that there is a point of no return where when it's so obscene, right? Maybe it's just wrong in terms of flaunting, in terms of excessive, use of wealth.
Actually,
And you give tzedakah, you can give more tzedakah, right? So, right, so that in my head, let me just mute. Okay, right. In my head, that's where I draw the line. Okay, I'm happy to take any questions on weddings, and then we can do the other tshuva also. Last thoughts or questions on weddings? Okay, again, I will also readily admit that the minhag ha'olam is not necessarily with me on that, but That's how I see it. Okay. So shul fights, shul majority versus the board of the shul. And the question that was asked was, there is a shul in Israel, right? And there is a fight between the tzibur and we'll call it the board, right? They want to have a hashkama minyan, right? So they're pushing for a hashkama minyan in the shul, and the people want it. And the board says it's going to mess up davening time, it's going to mess up the flow of whatever the board's argument is, they're against. And so they come to, right? They come to Beis Din, they're making their claims. And the board says that we were empowered by the shul to make decisions. They are our decisions. We have the right to make them. And therefore we're going to make the decision against. And the board and the people say, well, let's send out a vote. Let's take a membership vote and see what the majority says, right? If the majority are against, okay, so then we'll rescind. But if the majority are in favor, then we want to have the hashkama minyan. Okay, so this is actually the more interesting of the tshuvas, even though the first topic is a more interesting topic in theory. This was to me a more fascinating tshuva. So the first thing he does is he apologizes for not answering the question right away. And he tells the people in the shul as follows: I'm sorry for not answering you right away. He goes, but I never answer questions to shul about shuls on the spot. When a person comes over to ask me a question, I never answer them right away. And he said he learned this from his Rebbe, Rav Ben Zion Uziel, who was the first Sephardic chief rabbi of Israel, a tremendous Talmid Chacham, who he sings the praises of for 3 sentences. And he says that halacha is not always clear cut. You can have multiple opinions. And he says, what if I give an answer and the rub of the shul is already paskin? I'm going to create a big machlokas in the shul. They're going to say, oh, the chief rabbi said X and you said Y. You're an idiot. You're right. You don't know anything. And they're going to embarrass the rabbi. They're going to create a big fight in the shul. And therefore, he says, as I didn't want to answer the question until I spoke to other people to make sure there wasn't a psak already offered in the shul. So that was actually a fascinating, that was his approach, right? Shows you what kind of person he was, thoughtful, considerate, right? Not everyone is so, even amongst Talmidei Chachamim. So that was just a very nice thing to see how sensitive he was to not creating machlokes and to not unnecessarily embarrassing somebody. All right, now so if the rabbi had made a mistake, so he's happy. I guess he would have nicely whatever, but just to throw out an opinion without knowing what happened before, especially in a shul context, he didn't want to do, so he apologizes. Okay, let me ask you, who should win, majority or a board? Right? What do you think? Having been involved in shuls from whatnot for years and years, who actually gets to win?
I think win is a really bad word. I think
Okay, who gets to make the decision, Judy? I accept that. Who gets to make the decision? Because you're right, once there's a fight, nobody wins. But who makes the ultimate decision? Who's going to decide if there's a hashkama minyan in this shul or not?
so ultimately, the people will make that decision with or without the agreement of the board, because if the board doesn't agree, they'll just do what every shul does. There'll be a breakaway.
Right. Okay.
Or there'll be another, or next year there'll be another vote. There'll be write-in candidates. These people on the board will be gone. So the answer is, if you care about the shul and you care about the people, you have, God, I hate these words, but you have these discussion groups where people talk to each other and explain their points. And ultimately, you don't own the shul if you're on the board. You're supposed to be representing, it's almost like Congress. They're supposed to be representing the views and the needs of the people. And ultimately, everyone's going to come to a consensus that if we don't have the hashkama minyan, we're going to tear the shul apart. A little bit like our Young Israel business many years ago.
I think the
So-
board,
Yeah, go.
no, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead. I mean,
Go
basically,
ahead.
that's my feeling, that in the end, It's not gonna who's gonna win. They're gonna come to a consensus that they're gonna do it, or there's gonna be a breakaway and everybody will be angry. So, and nobody wants that if they can avoid it.
Right. So I fully agree. In Israel, it's a little bit different because a lot of areas, especially in poorer areas, and since there is no separation of church and state, very often the government pays for a shul, but it's not necessarily true that people can leave and start their own shul because they can't afford it. In America, you're spot on. That's what would happen. You have a fight, you have a breakaway, and adios. But yes, in America, that certainly is right. Ted, what were you saying?
No, I just thought the board, shul has vested the board the responsibility. So I would think they decide and let consequences be what the next time they vote.
Okay, so now, right, those are certainly the two options, right? It's the board or it's the shul. It's really the membership. Otherwise, right? Judy has the more compromised approach. So in terms of the halacha, right here, he plays on a term that we're familiar with from the Gemara at times. Right, the town council, as it were, and this comes up in the context of who can sell a shul. Right. So in Bracha, I had these discussions. Can you sell a shul? Who can sell a shul? How do you sell a shul? Right. Practically on the table for us as well. Right. So the Gemara says the Shiva Tuve Ha'ir. It is the 7 elected members, what we would call a town council of sorts. And that, he says, is essentially the board. Right. The board functions as the Shiva Tuve Ha'ir, and that gives them a certain amount of responsibility, and it gives them a certain amount of authority. But there is, right, one major qualification. The next phrase in that line is, it's Shiva Tuve Ha'ir b'ma'amad anshe Ha'ir, right, which means in the presence of the people of the city. Because Judy is right, that the people who gave the board, who invested the board with their power, is the membership of the shul. And therefore, what halacha mandates is that they must, right? They have the authority, but they have to do it in the presence of the townspeople, right? And that is, I won't read it, but it's on it's the third source on your source sheet. The Ramah says, in terms of selling a shul, that yes, it has to be done in public, and if it's done in public, that counts as ma'amad anshe ha'ir. And the reason for that is, right, one, it has to be made public, so that if people disagree, they can voice their disagreement. And once that is the case, they are no longer representing the people, right? And essentially, his argument is for the people against the board, because the board is a representative of the people. They are invested from the people. Once the people decide, right, the vote itself doesn't hold that much sway. It is the people that give the board power, and they can take it away once they're in disagreement and they don't longer represent the majority of the people. They are no longer Shiva Tuve Ha'ir. Right. So from a halachic perspective, the board really only functions as long as they serve the majority of the membership of the shul.
But for a Haskama minyan, you're not necessarily serving the majority. It could be the 20 people who would like it and the 800 people who don't, or whatever.
Right, but the question is, what's better for the shul as a shul? Again, I don't know what.
Right.
So right, we don't know what the details. Right, we don't
know what's best for the shul.
Right, and the people are saying now. Again, there's a million different. It could be seating. It could be the 2 different kiddushes. It could be It could be who could be a Baal Koreh. I mean, there's a lot of different issues that could come up. Who's going to go find the next Baal Koreh for the Hashkama minyan?
Well, so
Right,
that's why
overlap.
says you need to talk.
Right, but I'm saying there's.
Yes, you want a Hashkama minyan.
But it's
Have you
not
thought about
just
this and this
about
and
the
this?
people. What I'm saying just to you, Eve, is it's not just about the 20 people who want the Hashkama minyan. It's about what's better for the shul in general, right? If you have to hire a Baal Koreh and it costs money, that costs money from everybody. Again, I know there are ways around it, right? They can hire, they can raise the funds, they can do whatever. But as a whole, from a halachic perspective, he believes that the vote is not the important piece. It is the the committee that represents the majority, and that's why everything they do can't be in secret. It has to be made public so that they continue to represent the majority of the shul.
Is there a magic to the number 7 in this?
No, that's just what they used to do. There's no magic to the number 7, but in ancient times in the Gemara, it was 7. It was this Shiva Tuvei Ha'ir.
No, I'm just wondering, when we get into the situation with stone where it's 10, 7 doesn't pop up, but I'm just wondering.
No, I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. Why is it 7? It's a fair question. I don't know. The other thing that he says, which is fascinating, okay, there's 2 other points in the tshuva. One is that rove, right, is actually a halachic decision principle in Torah, right? That's how in many areas, right, majority rules, certainly in the world of kashrus, until they went to the 160 rule and destroyed us all, right? It used to be a majority would nullify min ha-Torah, right? So rove is a Torah principle. This idea of having a town council is a rabbinic enactment. He doesn't really mean this, but he sort of means it. Right, but his as a support to his previous position that the majority wins, right? He wants to argue that the majority is a Torah principle, and that should outweigh the Shiva Tuvei Ha'ir, which is a rabbinic enactment. He then does something at the end of the tshuva, which has nothing to do with the tshuva, but is really kind of interesting. He says, if this works on a shul level, should it work on a national level? Do we say that the government only represents the people and derives its power from the people when they represent the will of the people? And let's talk in abstract here, because I know practically you go figure that out.
Is that on every issue or just in general?
So it's not in halachic issues, right? That's one thing he's very clear on. If the majority of the country wants, pork to be sold on the streets, that doesn't count for anything, right? But
it has to be a majority on each particular issue. I mean,
Yeah.
So that representative body can keep changing in a sense.
Yes, it's not very practical, but he does think that at least ideally, it is operational on a national level also. But then he raises the issue. He said, well, wait a minute. In a shul, you can have a decent idea what's good for the shul, right? Nationally, do you get to have an opinion on things that you're not really privy to? Right? That actually is one of the questions that fascinates me in terms of politics in the world. Like, everybody has very strong opinions on all kinds of governmental issues. On many of those issues, I'm not fully convinced, certainly on military issues, right? Netanyahu is handling the war fabulously. Netanyahu is handling the war abysmally. Okay, there are people who will swear to that and die for that, who really have very little information to go on. I think most people were not privy to the inner workings, to the threats, to the numbers, right? So that's the issue he raises. And nationally, do you really go with the majority when the majority is not qualified to offer an opinion? And then he flips it back and says, well, wait a minute, maybe they weren't qualified to vote the people in because they didn't know enough either. And that's a really interesting point. Right? It goes full circle. But that to me, again, it's just fascinating tshuva because he raises all these issues. Again, practically, it doesn't really work. Certainly not in Israel's, messed up political system and the parties and whatnot.
But yet also could end up not protecting the minority that way.
It
Depending on what the
could.
decisions are.
It
then-
could. Right, but in terms of American society, which has no impact on it at all because it's not a halachic society, right? But if you won the electoral college and lost the popular vote, right, that would be a fascinating distinction. Be interesting, right? But that's kind of how he parses out the shul. Once he gets to the fact that it's the majority that really has the power, I'm not sure why he puts the national piece in the tshuva, but it was really kind of interesting. Right? Do you get the right to vote on an issue that you know very little about? right? We went on this FIDF mission, and every place we went, it's like, this is off the record. They're giving you the secrets. And when they asked me afterwards, like what I thought of the trip, I said very nice things. And I said to them, I said, anytime somebody says that to me, I know I could read the same thing in the newspaper. We met with the general who literally was in charge of all the ground troops in Gaza. I learned more from the Jerusalem Post than I did from him. Somebody forced him to be there. He hadn't been home in months. He hadn't slept in weeks. The guy didn't, and he shouldn't give away state secrets, right? But the moment they say, this is off the record, don't share it on social media, I know I'm getting nothing, okay? Right? So how do I know how the war is really going? We see whether we're winning or losing at some level, but that to me, I thought was that's a fascinating question, right? Who gets the right to make decisions and what knowledge is required? It's almost a throwaway at the end of the tshuva, but that might have been the most interesting thing to me in both of these tshuvos combined.
What
With
we
that,
didn't discuss,
yes.
I'm sorry.
No, please,
There's,
please.
okay, so there's the push and pull, because on the one hand, you have to be a leader, and sometimes leaders are ahead of the curve and sort of have to drag the people with them because they see into, well, nobody sees into the future, but there's a vision that needs to be fulfilled maybe. So there are times sometimes when as leaders, you're doing things and people are not with you yet, and you eventually have to win them over. And then there are times when you have to listen to the people. It's not a simple either or. In most some situations it's pretty obvious. Yes, put the tuna fish in the kiddush. But other than that, there's a lot of issues where I think, I mean, our shul, certainly we would not have the Ocean Avenue Minyan if there hadn't been some vision somewhere along the way, because there were people who were plenty upset. It's going to break the shul apart, blah, blah, blah. I mean, everything evolves, and at some point leaders have to lead, and at some points maybe they don't. And that finding that line
So
is
I agree.
situational.
I think that was really his second point, which was, right, part of that, and it's not the same, but I think connected, was that you really can't simply use a majority because, yes, they're not necessarily aware. And you're right. It's certainly in a country, and even in a shul, but much more so in a country, that should happen. Who has the right to do it? You know, that I guess, again,
Well, in any organization, you're going to find self-interest versus the communal interest.
yeah.
So
at
the
some
majority
level.
might have self-interest involved, but if it's a community, then certain decisions still have to be made in order for the community to function in the long run.
Right. Again, so I agree with you. The country is much more difficult.
That's tuna.
What?
So is tuna.
Tuna wasn't that difficult. Don't eat the
No.
tuna. You'll be okay. You'll live.
Yeah.
It'll be okay. But I'm not sure how practical it is. I was surprised that he extended it to the country. But I think the discussion of how halacha applies to countries is an interesting discussion. This was really a throwaway at the end of the tshuva. I think, right, you're certainly right. There's no way every country decision could just be made by majority. It would be a crazy, inefficient, and terrible way to run a country. And probably a shul for that matter, but certainly a country where there's so much at stake. But as we say, we really just, I try and stick to reading the tshuvos and learning the tshuvos as opposed to flying all over the place. It just gives us some semblance of, so there's certainly more to be said and more to be explored. But that is that's what we have from these tshuvos. Any last questions?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Can we
No, it's
go
fine.
back to last week for a minute? When we were talked about the draft and the Haredi.
Yes, we can do that.
Okay. So it bothered me, and I was thinking about it. When they go to shul and they do the Haftarah of Shirat Devorah, and she rebukes Shevet Reuven, the tribe of Reuven, because they don't come and fight. She says, "Where were you? Why didn't you come?" It is Reuven, I think, right?
Right.
Yes. Why didn't you come and fight? How do they sit in shul and read this and not think we're not fighting? That, I mean, it seems to be such an obvious rebuke. Your brothers are dying, and you're Where are you?
Listen, Moshe Rabbeinu says the same thing, right? Devorah is simply, repeating the argument of Moshe Rabbeinu when they right to God, Reuben, God, and Chatzi Shevet HaManashe. How could you sit here and not come and fight?
He doesn't have to Menashe. He puts
But
Menashe.
they
that's-
say we will.
Right, so it's God and Reuben. Okay.
Okay,
Well, but
but in that case, they say they will.
Right.
Yeah.
In that
They
case, they
say
say
they
they will.
will.
But in this case, with Devorah, she's saying you didn't come. So I don't understand how the Haredi can sit in shul, hear Shirat Devorah, and not feel this pang that they're talking about me.
Judy, it's a woman talking.
It's a woman
No, but the woman talking they can deal with because she was a prophetess. So when you become a prophetess, they'll listen to you. Until then, you're not worth anything, right? There you go. When God speaks to you, you're worth something. But until God speaks to a woman, no, right? I think I think the answer is that there are some people bothered by it, right? There is in Rav Lichtenstein's article on Hesder, there's an anecdote there where he says that somebody came from Katamon and told Rav Aaron he was moving because he couldn't come to shul. He wasn't going to send his kids to the army. He wasn't living in that world, but he felt embarrassed to come to shul when everyone else was going to the army and his kids weren't. So maybe there are a minority. I think it's abundantly clear from a halachic perspective that in a Milchemes mitzvah, everyone has to fight. So they're not making a halachic argument, right? They are telling you protecting our community is worth more than anything else. It's worth more than Eretz Yisrael. It's worth more than your fellow Jews. Now, as repugnant as that sounds, and it does, that's the argument. They're not making a textual or a halachic argument. They are saying to you, you're coming to destroy our community. We have to protect it at all costs. All costs. The government has become the enemy. The army has become the enemy. The religious Zionist Jew is the misguided fool. But that's what they've done, right? The army wants to make you not frum. You go to any 6-year-old kid in that neighborhood, they're going to tell you that. What you say army, they say they want to make me not frum, right? It's the lines they're being fed by leadership. I mean, this week again, Yitzchak Yosef, I have demoted him from rabbi. I said, even guys not learning shouldn't go to the army. He knows it's against the halacha. But they're coming for you, and we won't give an inch. Not an inch.
So they're okay with breaking the halacha.
Yes, because they're saving their community in Judaism. Right? Yes, they're saving the world in Judaism in their minds. Right? There's an inability to see beyond
Self-interest.
That's not so I wouldn't say self-interest because I want to be fair. They literally think, this is what they're being fed. They're coming to get you. They want to make you not frum. We are towing the line. We're not giving in. We're keeping it in our fortress. And the only thing that will save Judaism is the fortress. Right now, there's a lack of.
So the only way to stay from is to disregard this halacha.
Yes.
That's
what it is.
Does not
it doesn't
work.
compute
It
for you. Doesn't compute for me. Right. I also think that they don't
That's
see
me.
the right. If Judaism is how you learn and how you daven, and that's your definition, and that's the bubble, right? Somehow saving the Jewish people has been demoted on the hierarchy of values, right? That's mind-boggling. It's mind-numbing and boggling and disappointing and frustrating all at the same time, right? Literally, you're saving Jewish lives and you're saving Am Yisrael. And that's not a value enough to break the bubble. I don't know how to answer that, Judy. I really don't. But they will tell you, no, they don't really need you, and we're really protecting you, and you want to break us down. You want to make us not frum. You're destroying.
And it's more important than the actual halacha.
Yeah.
That this is the one time where they're They wouldn't have
so-
Halal
so-
Shabbat, but this one is okay.
So Yaakov Weinstein, who some people here know, who's a brilliant Talmid Chacham and an old friend in Chavrusa, he once said that what is that? Right, that's like conservative and Reform Judaism, that you decide when you want to keep the halacha. And he was talking about the Moetzes Gedolei HaTorah. Okay, I mean that's right. Meaning, in a sense, you're right. Meaning, if a Jew is bound by halacha, a Jew should be bound by halacha. The moment you decide when halachos apply, you're outside of orthodoxy. Yaakov is right. He usually is
Yep.
right, but I mean, he's a very smart guy.
Isn't Rabbi Bombek showing them that you can be frum and still participate?
He's trying. He's trying, but he'll tell you it's an uphill battle. So I give him all of the kudos in the world for fighting a good fight, and I hope he wins.
But he's got 10 yeshivas now.
Okay, but how many yeshivas are there in the Haredi world? A lot more. If 10 yeshivas is 2,500 people, there's probably 1.5 million Haredim in Israel. I mean, it's a small amount. Again, I love the guy. I wish him success. I think we need more people like him. We do. The Eretz Yisrael, Am Yisrael needs more people like him, fighting that fight and doing their best. But he's a minority voice, right? And I'm not sure, to use halachic terminology, that's a miut, that is matsui, right? That is a noticeable minority, right? There are noticeable minorities and unnoticeable minorities.
Not even a 60th.
I'm not sure he's a noticeable, right? Not sure he's a miut hamatzah. I don't know, but that's the argument. It's not from halacha. It's saving Judaism. Right? And a failure to appreciate that fighting for Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael is actually Judaism. But
Then the question comes up, well, how many people do you need to save Judaism?
so again, Big Gadol, that is their approach. I'm not sure I'm fine tuning it with so well, but that is the thrust of the approach is that. Right?
Okay.
You want to destroy Judaism. We are the last bulwark of traditional real Judaism. Right. Now, the joke is that we never had that many kolim and non-working people in the history of the world. It is only the American and Israeli welfare systems that allows this. Right. In our history, you think in Poland, in the great heyday of the yeshivas, they went to the government and said, can we have a subsidy for a yeshiva? I doubt it, because that would have got you shot.
Right.
Maybe butchered, raped, and then shot, but it would have gotten you shot at the end. They would have, right? So it's the system, but that's the major argument. So yeah, they ignore halacha. Not good,
All
but
right.
I'm not sure I can
think
change that
that's-
mind. But it is a fascinating thing.
All right. Crazy, but okay.
I
It is.
agree. I'm not disagreeing. All right. With
All right.
that, I wish everyone a good night.
Okay.
And we'll see you all next week. Thank you.
All right.